Välkomna tillbaka. This seminar will be in English, and I would like to promote everyone that is here to tag us in your pictures. If you have the hashtag or the Instagram account, MR-dagarna, it's same in both. So this seminar is going to be about the Arab Spring and what have happened 10 years after. So with those words, I would like to ask for a big applaud for the moderator of this seminar, Anna Roxvall.
Thank you. A decade ago now, tens of thousands of Sahrawis gathered outside of Aaiún, which is the capital of Western Sahara, which is currently occupied by Morocco. And they built a big protest camp called Gdeim Izik, where they demanded socio-economic rights and an end to the occupation. This is something that since has been quite forgotten because these massive protests were later to be overshadowed by other events, but they preceded, or might even some say have sparked, the Arab Spring that was to come. So today, Swedish NGO Emmaus Stockholm has invited 4 guests from the region to discuss justice, human rights and democracy in the Maghreb region 10 years after the start of the Arab Spring. And we've had several problems concerning transportation and permission to fly, etc. So I'm very happy that we have at least 2 of them here in physical form. My name is Anna Roxvall. I'm a journalist and an author, and I have a special focus on Africa, and among other things, I have written a book about Western Sahara issue. So I'm very happy to be moderating our discussion today, and I look forward to gaining new insight into the topic from our panelists. Themes from this discussion have also been discussed in an article series on Emmaus Stockholm's website. So for those of you who want to dig deeper into the topic, you can head onto emmausstockholm.se, and then there is a tab called Reports where you will find this. In an ideal world, we would have time for some questions towards the end, but I think considering the fact that we have translator and so on, it might be difficult. But if you have any questions, please write them down and save them. If we have time, we will make sure the panelists get them. And if we don't have, they will hopefully be available afterwards for questions. So anyway, so thank you all for joining us today. And thank you, Emmaus Stockholm, for organizing this. And now it's with great honor and pleasure that I welcome our 4 distinguished panelists. And I think we start with the ones who are here. We have Mr. Said Amidan, media activist, co-founder, journalist at Equipe Media, which is a collective of independent journalists who document Morocco's oppression against people who fight for an independent Western Sahara. Welcome to Gothenburg.
Welcome, gracias.
And then we have Mr. Slama Said Filali, who is project coordinator at the NGO Non-Violence Action in Western Sahara, NOVA. NOVA operates mainly in the Sahrawi refugee camps outside in Algeria, and they aim to show that a peaceful path to a free Western Sahara is possible. Very much welcome to you as well.
Welcome, thank you.
And then on link, we have Mr. Youssef Sakej, who is a researcher at Intersection. He's a well-known human rights defender and activist in Tunisia. Hello and welcome.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody.
And then we also have Mr. Mohamed Sheikh Houmani, who is Vice President of the regional office in Southwest at the Moroccan Association for Human Rights, which is one of the biggest human rights NGOs that are working to defend human rights in Morocco and Western Sahara. Very much welcome to you as well.
Thank you. Welcome.
And thank you so much for overcoming all the obstacles and coming here today, either digitally or physically. It's a pleasure to have you here with us.
Thank you.
So we will start. During the next 40 minutes, I think we will have a discussion regarding democracy, human rights and justice in the Maghreb region, and how and if the Arab Spring has brought any positive developments in the region, and what obstacles remain. I also need to say that we have a translator here. What's your name, sir?
Sadek.
Okay, hi, Sadek. Do you want to translate this first, or should we?
To translate what to them?
This, what I just said, or do you want to stick to the questions maybe?
Okay.
Yeah.
أنا نصبح مترجم بتاعكم. Is it? That's okay?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I start with Said Amidan.
سعيد حميدان أنت تبدأ.
The Arab Spring was preceded by the protests in occupied Western Sahara, where Sahrawis were protesting for socioeconomic rights and against the Moroccan occupation. Could you please share your thoughts on those events from the perspective of the Sahrawis in this area?
ممكن تحكي لنا كيف يعني القضية بتاع الصحراء المغربية؟
الغربية.
الصحراء الغربية. وكيف أنتم يعني كان الحراك موجود كنتوا وش هم الحقوق اللي كنتوا تطلبوهم؟
بالنسبة للحراك والله بالنسبة للمخيم الاحتجاجي اللي هو يسمى مخيم قديم إيزيك، يعني هو تم تأسيسه في 10 أكتوبر 2010.
ما فهمتكش أنا حبيبي.
بالنسبة للمخيم الاحتجاجي هو مخيم احتجاجي اسمه قديم إيزيك، يعني بالعيون المحتلة بالصحراء الغربية.
لا ما فهمت الكلام. I'm sorry, I just don't understand those words he used to use it. Can someone else? Can you just? I'm sorry. Can you tell it louder? I don't hear.
Hello, sorry. There is a difference between Algerian dialect and Western Sahara dialect, so I will be here helping.
Welcome up on stage.
I will re-ask him the question. راح يحكي لكم على الوقت اللي قال لك الربيع العربي تقريبا بدأ عندكم انتم في الصحراء الغربية، وكان عن طريقة الاحتجاج ضد الاحتلال المغربي. وش تقدروا يعني وش هو إحساسكم أنه بعد هذه الفترة بدأ عندكم انتم الربيع العربي ضد الاحتلال المغربي وتواصل؟
يعني طبعا بالنسبة للمخيم قديم إيزيك هو احتجاج سلمي، يعني حوالي 35,000 مواطن صحراوي نزحوا عن مدينة العيون المحتلة للتعبير للمطالبة بحقوقهم الاجتماعية والاقتصادية وأيضا السياسية.
This Gdeim Izik was like 35,000 Sahrawis were there, and they were like in peaceful way. They were against asking for their rights against Moroccans, and rights including political rights, economical and social rights, but it was in peaceful way.
ولكن للأسف لم تكن هناك دعاية، لم تكن هناك تغطية إعلامية من العالم ومن العالم العربي، لأنه كان هناك تعتيم إعلامي لما يقع في الصحراء الغربية.
But unfortunately, what did not help on this situation that they did not have like enough media to share about this camps, that it was against this Moroccan occupation, and that leads to a lot of problems later.
ولكن قضية لكن الاحتجاج في الصحراء الغربية غير مرتبط بما يسمى بالربيع العربي.
But what is happening in Western Sahara has no relation, like direct relation with the Arab Spring.
لأن قضية الشعب الصحراوي هي قضية تصفية استعمار، هي قضية مدرجة ضمن القانون الدولي للشعوب غير المتمتعة بالاستقلال الذاتي.
Because the big difference is that Western Sahara is not like it's mostly a colonization issue, and it's not like the other Arab countries that they are asking for change, but for Western Sahara they are asking for decolonization.
لأنه مختلف تماماً عن الثورات العربية، لأن هي ثورات ضد أنظمة ديكتاتورية، بينما المقاومة في الصحراء الغربية هي ضد احتلال.
Because in other Arab countries they are demonstrating against dictators, their own presidents that are dictators, but for Western Sahara they are against a government that is colonizing them.
ولكن طبعا على أنها مخيم قديم إيزيك كيف ما قال المفكر نعوم تشومسكي هو الشرارة من الصحراء الغربية.
But at the end, we have to say that the beginning really starts from Gdeim Izik about the Arab Spring in other countries.
And then these protests at Gdeim Izik, they were soon followed by protests in Tunisia, which gained a lot of more attention. So I'm thinking we're moving over to Tunisia now and to Mr. Youssef Sakij. Could you please tell us what was later to be known as the Arab Spring? Back then it wasn't called that yet. But can you describe what you experienced in your country, Tunisia, at this time?
I want to say, first of all, thank you for the platform to express. And just to mention, as I always say, that there's a specificity with the Tunisian case, because certainly the world has witnessed major changes, especially with the demonstration that escalated in December 2010, when the social movement launched the premises of a revolution in Tunisia that was later known as the Arab Spring. In a short time, Tunisia has lived countless political and social events to which it was not used to. I will try to use the terms of Antonio Gramsci to better explain the situation experienced by Tunisians. From the old man who died to the slow to be born. The old man who died, I'm referring here to the former President Ben Ali, with his authoritarian regime, which has violated human rights by the political repression of his opponents and freedom of expression. And the new one, which is slow to be born, which presents itself as a more egalitarian society, in terms of human rights, a well-established rule of law and respect of international treaties, something that was unknown under the Ben Ali era. During this tumult, the Tunisian witnessed for the first time a democratic movement.
Thank you so much. And then there is another country in the region that also experienced a massive wave of protests, and that was Morocco, where people protested against repression and for democratic change. So I'm moving over to Mr. Mohammed Sheikh Roumani. In your words, what did the beginning of the Arab Spring look like in Morocco?
Thank you. Thank you also to Emmaus to give us this occasion to take part in this event in Sweden. To be fair, Morocco, since formal independence, has no social movement over the years, including many years of 1965, 1981, 1944, 1919, all this way to arrive to 2011. All were met with severe repression as a result. Dozens of people were killed, kidnapped, and detained. In my opinion, what happened in 2011 through the emergence of 25-year movement is a continuation of popular democratic struggle in Morocco. This time, it is coincidence with a strong movement in the Maghreb area and the emergence of what can be called the civil resistance. There were conjunctive accumulation that made a quantum leap throughout the emergence of February movement.
Thank you. And then we have the refugees from Western Sahara who are living in camps in Algeria. They were also experiencing the Arab Spring from afar. So, Mr. Slama Said, you are project coordinator at NOVA, and you mostly operate in the Sahrawi refugee camps. How did the refugees experience news of this new social movement that was to be known as the Arab Spring?
بالنسبة لك أنت اللي عايش في مخيمة اللاجئين، كيفاش حسيتوا بهذا يعني الربيع العربي؟ كيفاش وصلكم وأنتم تشوفوه على وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي وإلى آخره؟
في البداية بودي أن أشكر منظمة إماوس على هذه الفرصة اللي تحت لنا نتكلموا في هذا الموضوع المهم.
At the beginning, I want to say thank you so much to Emmaus Stockholm for allowing us to express our feelings.
الشعب في الصحراوي في مخيمات اللاجئين تلقى أخبار الربيع العربي بكثير من الأمل.
At the refugee camps, Sahrawis people were receiving this Arab Springs news with full hope.
أمل أنه يكون بداية للتغيير، بداية لميلاد ديمقراطية في المنطقة، في هذه المنطقة، أمل للقضاء على الدكتاتوريات.
The hope was that it will be a real democracy on the region and that there will be no more dictators.
والأمل أيضاً على انتشار الحريات وانفتاح المجتمعات على المجتمعات الأخرى، وأن تكون هنا الحياة إتاحة حياة كريمة لكافة شعوب المنطقة.
And this hope was including that they will receive more freedom and all the people of the region will be living a real nice life where everyone respects each other. So.
لكن للأسف اليوم نحن بعد 10 سنوات من هذا الربيع العربي، إنه جل هذه الآمال خاب نتيجة للواقع الكارثي اللي آل إليه خاصة في بعض المناطق.
But unfortunately, now after 10 years, we are so disappointed by the reality that we came to, especially in some places.
لكن آمالنا كبيرة في الشعوب وفي وعي الشعوب، وأنه هذه الحقوق ما دام هناك من يطالب بها سيأتي يوم ونراها على أرض الميدان إن شاء الله.
But we still have hope on one thing, that public have a kind of knowledge, and as soon as there are people that are looking for their rights, sure, one day they will reach their rights.
Thank you. And I'm thinking we'll just stay here in the Arab Spring that we called it, and look at landmark events. So I'm turning to Said Amidan again. The protests that began in the occupied parts of Western Sahara, they hope to bring democratic change and justice. What would you say were the most important events that occurred from your perspective during the Arab Spring?
بالنسبة لهذا الشرارة اللي بدأت والتحركات اللي بدأت، أنت في رأيك ما هو الدافع الأساسي، ولا كيفاش كانت البداية اللي دفعت لهذا مثلا قديم إزيك؟ شو الأسباب في نظرك أنت؟
بالنسبة للمخيم قديم إزيك أسبابه كانت واضحة، هي أسباب اقتصادية، أسباب سياسية، أسباب مطالبة بحق شعب الصحراوي.
Yeah. The main reason was mostly economical reason, but more than that, it's the right of Sahrawi people for self-determination.
ويعني كان أسبابه يعني إسماع صوت الشعوب المضطهدة، صوت الشعوب المقهورة.
And they want to show that people must listen to publics or people that they don't have rights, and their rights have been violated.
يعني الجماهير الصحراوية في الأرض المحتلة تخلت عن منازلها، يعني لجأت بعيدا عن المدن في شكل احتجاجي، نصب حوالي 8000 خيمة كتعبير احتجاجي سلمي حضاري.
So many Sahrawis people, they moved out of their houses and they built over 8,000 camp, like tent, so far away to express that they are against this Moroccan political, but in peaceful way and with full respect and culture.
يعني عقب هذا الاحتجاج السلمي بالخيم أصبح يعني النظام المغربي حالا يمنع نصب الخيم، يعني أصبحت الخيمة رمز الخيمة ممنوع على الصحراويين بناء الخيمة.
من بداية
من عقب بعد قديم إزيك.
Okay, and after Gdeim Izik, Morocco starts like preventing people, anyone, to build a tent wherever he is after this Gdeim Izik, because it starts to be like symbol for Sahrawi people for ask for their self-determination.
يعني احنا بطبيعتنا كشعب صحراوي كنا من قبل نسكن في الخيم، يعني الخيمة رمز الحرية، يعني في البادية رمز الحرية، رمز الكرامة.
Even before that, for Sahrawi people, always tent has been like a symbol for freedom and for peace.
والمغرب يعني حاول يعني أنه يمنع الخيمة، يمنع الخيمة كهوية للشعب الصحراوي.
And Morocco, when Moroccan government is fighting tents, it's not fighting like tents as something, but as Sahrawi's identity, because that's their identity.
ولذلك الشعوب يعني عرفت عنه الاحتجاج السلمي عنده رسالة، يعني عنده هدف، عنده مستقبل. يعني شعوب المنطقة ككافة يعني أصبحت عندها صوت تطالب به من أجل حقوقها.
And he's trying to explain that was the relation between their protest and the Arab Spring, because after what they have done, Arab people understood that there is like a peaceful way to protest for your rights.
So I'm moving over to Tunisia now, where we have Mr. Youssef Sakej. Tunisia is arguably the country that has seen the greatest positive democratic change since the Arab Spring. So do you feel that there are some particular events or reasons as to why this has become the case?
Indeed, a democracy has emerged in Tunisia. Particularly, this manifested itself with transparent elections for the first time since the independence, since 1956. I mentioned the parliamentary election of 2011, 14, and recently 2019, as well as the presidential election of 2014 and 2019, which helped to establish a continuous democratic culture from 2011 until now. You see, now, but above all, what should be underlined is the democratic transition of power, which is the first in the countries of the Arab Spring and the Arab history in general. But the main events and reasons that must be also mentioned is July 25th, 2021. Such the achievements of the Arab Spring, such as transparency, freedom of expression, peaceful transition of power, have been threatened since July 25th. And this democratic process has stagnated from that date with the current President Qais Said, especially with the dismantling of justice. It manifests itself with the failure to respect the principle of a reasonable jurisdictional time, especially the month of August and September 2021, and the failure to respect the failure of the judicial service to protect in a fair trial human rights defenders who oppose the movement of 25th of July and its policies of custody and forced detentions. These are the main events like to be mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Mohammed Sheikh Oumani, then in Morocco, over there the political system has, at least from the outside, as it seems, remained fairly stable despite the protests during the Arab Spring, but people have still protested. Can you think of some crucial events during that time, and which of them made an impact from your perspective?
Thank you. After the start of the popular movement, 20 February movement, and departure of hundreds of thousands of citizens in all cities and villages, raising the slogan of freedom, dignity, social rights, and justice. And they demand a change of the constitution. Political system did not wait a long time. In 9 March, the king gave a speech and formed a royal commission to change the constitution. This constitution will be supported by Makhzen parties, political parties which support regime, support the king speech, and also support the speech of the commission funded by the king. Well, the other parties of left party and Islamic movement still support the movement in the street, but the difference, the growing difference between left party and Islamic give to the political system to pass this stage peacefully, where the constitution was changed, but they still have the same substance.
Thank you. So then we're moving over to the refugee camps. We have heard the other panelists discuss some important events from their perspective, but then from your perspective, Slama Said Filali, which were the events of importance for the Sahrawi people who were living in the refugee camps? Yeah, which events made the most impact for the refugees in the camps?
يعني بالنسبة لك ما هو الحدث اللي وقع اللي أحدث تغيير كتير ولا أثر كثير على الواقع في المخيمات اللاجئين وعلى اللاجئين الصحراويين؟
نحن كما تعلمون انه الصحراويين متواجدين في المناطق المحتله وجزء متواجد في المخيمات، وبالتالي اكثر شيء اثر فينا طبيعي هو وهو ليس غريب، هو هذا حدث مخيم قديم إيزيك اللي ظهر في 10 اكتوبر كما اشار الاخ سعيد. لكن عندنا بعض الملاحظات انه نحن اهم حدث بالنسبه لنا هو مخيم قديم إيزيك، لانه يعبر عن واقعنا ويعبر عن تطلعاتنا ويعبر عن طموحاتنا كشعب صحراوي مهما كان في المخيمات وفي المناطق المحتله. الهدف دائما يبقى واحد، هو تحرير الصحراء، وبالتالي هذا المخيم هو اللي يعبر عن راينا.
The most important thing, as you know, that there are some Sahrawis that lives in the refugee camps while others are in the occupied territories. So the most important thing is this Gdeim Izik, where when they made it, it was so important for them because they were expressing their feelings. They were expressing what they want, and that was so important for them.
لكن الملاحظة اللي لاحظناها نحن كصحراويين في المخيمات هو كما شار الأخ سعيد، هو حجم التعاطي. رغم أنه هذا المخيم كان دقة في التنظيم، رغم أنه هذا المخيم كان قام ببناء 8000 خيمة في منطقة تبعد 30 كيلومتر عن العاصمة العيون، وكان حدث كبير، لكن التغطية الإعلامية والاهتمام الدولي به كان تقريبا غير موجود مقارنة بالأحداث اللي شهدتها بعض المنطقة.
The most disappointing thing that, as you know, 8,000 tents were built, and it was like 30 kilometers far away. So people walked all that way to build their own camp to express their feelings, and they were disappointed by the fact that they were not seeing news in media, and they were trying to black the situation, even that it was so organized, and even that people did their best to express their feeling and their goals, which is sure self-determination.
وهون ممكن الشعب الصحراوي ولا الصحراويين اللي في المخيم يطرحوا بعض الأسئلة، وهي إنه والله عندهم بعض الملاحظات هي الازدواجية في التعامل. لما تكون مثلا مطالبة بالحرية في دولة أخرى العالم كامل يلتف، لكن لما تكون في الصحراء الغربية كأنه شيء عادي أو كأنه شيء لا حدث.
And they start feeling like the word is hypocrite or has two faces. When people are asking for democracy in any country in this world, all the words start talking about them and highlight this fact. But when people asking about their rights or asking for democracy in Western Sahara, everyone plays like blind and no one talk about it internationally.
والدليل على كلامي وهو مثال خارج الموضوع اللي نتكلم عنه، لكن مثال حقيقي وحي إلى الآن، هي الناشطة الحقوقية سلطانة خية وعائلتها اللي أكثر من عام، وهي عائلة متكونة من 3 نساء، محاصرات إقامة جبرية وانتهاك حقوقهم بأبشع الصور، والتعاطي معها الدولي شبه معدوم.
And one of the examples that it's not really related to our subject, but just to prove his point, is the human rights activist Sultana Khaya and her family, that over 1 year, Moroccan authorities are stopping them, like preventing them to go out, and many times they go inside their house, hit them, or violation, like a kind of human rights violation, but no one is talking about it in the world, which is a long period of 1 year.
So I'm thinking then, because then I think maybe this is where Equipe Media comes in then, I guess.
Yeah, هذا علاش سبب مجيئكم انتم ايكيب ميديا.
So let's look ahead then, because we've heard how the Arab Spring was experienced quite differently in the countries that we've touched today, and we have discussed some of the key events during this time from our panelists' perspectives, but it's time to look ahead. So, Said Amidan, what does the future look like for Western Sahara, and what areas should civil society focus on further?
بالنسبة لك ماذا ترى في مستقبل الصحراء الغربية وهذه المنظمات الحقوقية ولا يعني أي مناطق لازم يركزوا عليها ولا أي ناحية لازم يركزوا يعني؟
It's a very broad question.
أولاً كيف ما تعرفون الصحراء الغربية هي آخر مستعمرة في أفريقيا.
As you know, Western Sahara is the last colonization in Africa, at least, or in the world, we can say.
وحالاً يعني توجد حرب بين جبهة البوليسار والمغرب أكثر من مدة سنة.
And currently there is a war like between militaries in Western Sahara and Moroccans for over 1 year.
يعني من بعد 30 سنة من الانتظار المجتمع الدولي المنظومة الدولية باش تضمن حق الشعب الصحراوي في تقرير المصير.
Yeah, they have been waiting over 30 years after this ceasefire, waiting for governments or human rights to give to Sahrawi people their right for self-determination. Then when they were disappointed, they were obliged to come back to this fight, but with guns and weapons, and after ceasefire of over 30 years.
يعني تقريبا الحرب الأولى توقفت في 91 وجاءت بعثة الأمم المتحدة لتنظيم استفساف الصحراء الغربية، والشعب الصحراوي كان يطمح لطريقة ديمقراطية للتصويت يختار حقه في الاستقلال أو الانضمام.
As you know, the ceasefire were in 1991 after the UN mission arrives, and they kind of promised Sahrawi people for self-determination, and they believed on them, and they were waiting to find solution in like democratical way, but then they found that they are obliged to come back to stop this ceasefire contract.
يعني حالا ذاك 30 سنة من الانتظار، يعني من انتظار الحل.
After 30 years of waiting of solution, but it doesn't look like that it was coming.
يعني الصحراويين فقدوا الأمل في المنظومة الدولية، في العدالة الدولية.
So Sahrawi people are so disappointed, and they lost trust on UN missions and in general on international law or human rights law.
لأن بعض الدول تدعي الديمقراطية وهي باغية تمنع وجود الديمقراطية في الصحراء الغربية، ونتكلم عن الدولة الفرنسية والدولة الإسبانية اللي تمنع حق الشعب الصحراوي في تقرير المصير.
Because there are some countries that they always speak about democracy and they want to shout that they support democracy, but in the reality they are preventing Sahrawi people of having their self-determination, which is a part of democracy. Example of those countries are Spain and France.
Thank you.
But so if I understand you correctly, the future doesn't look very bright at the moment.
إذا فهمتك جيدا، يعني المستقبل غير واضح بالنسبة لكم.
طبعا غير واضح.
Yeah, it's
خصوصا الآن نقول الحرب عندنا أكثر تخوف.
Especially now after the war, they restart the war, so there are more people that are dying every day, which is.
لأنه هناك قلنا الضغط، يعني حتى النظام المغربي عنده صراع مع الجزائر، مع موريتانيا، مع إسبانيا، وربما الحرب في الصحراء الغربية تتطور لتشمل شمال إفريقيا، ولا شملت شمال إفريقيا أوروبا غير ما تسلك من هذا.
Yeah, the most difficult thing is that Morocco has problems not only with Western Sahara, with Mauritania and Spain and Algeria too. So they are afraid that this war between Morocco and Western Sahara will be in the other regions, which will affect even further countries like Europe.
Thank you. So, Youssef Sakej, what future prospects do you see for Tunisia? And same question to you then, what should civil society focus on onwards? What's the most pressing issues?
Ideally, the horizons so hoped for Tunisia are manifested by a harmony, a concomitance between not only democratic gains from 2011 until now, but above all, economic prosperity. Because the demonstration which have continued to arise since the revolution of 2011 are motivated by economic and economic and social considerations. And the experience in Tunisia demonstrated that the economic pillar boosts democracy and enforces human rights. I think as for the second part of the question, the absence of a reformist economic vision among the political class, which has reigned since 2011 until now, has greatly offended this delicate democratic process. Hence, the importance that human rights must be consolidated by a strong economy. And to succeed in this process, I think national and international civil society is invited and expected to strengthen with us the changes necessary to move from not just diagnosis and evaluation, but to concrete effective solution, to forecast and effective solutions. Thank you.
And you also described being quite much under pressure as civil society. Do you see any of that pressure decreasing ahead?
What happened in the 25th of July cannot be a calm event or a continuation of the democratic process since 2011. It's not a promise for a good democracy, because we are witnessing a lack of the jurisdictional service isn't like the same. It's dismantled, and the horizon isn't so much clear. That's what I have to say.
Thank you. And Mohammed Sheikh Houmani, 10 years after the protests started, Morocco is considered one of the least free countries in the world. How do you see the future for Morocco in terms of democratic development, and what should actors, for example NGOs, focus on onwards?
I think that in the end of the movement of 20 February in Morocco, and exactly in 2014, after the speech of the Minister of Interior in the Parliament, who accused all organizations and political parties who supported this movement for accusing them that they are working for foreign agenda and foreign agenda. Judicial action took place against human rights defender, activist, journalist, and member of Union Tribe. So the battle is moved from demanding political reform to demanding the realities to have free to detainee in the prison. Today, it remains for the organization to unify their struggle, overcome difference, and struggle for issue to be closer of citizens. Also, betting on the continued of the protest movement, because the most important thing after the movement of 20 February in Morocco, it's the important gain achieved by this movement is to break the wall of fire from front of authority. Thank you.
Thank you. And then finally, Slama Said Bilali, what are your hopes for the future for the Sahrawi people, and with a special focus on the refugee camps then? And how can actors, both locally, nationally, globally, help you?
بالنسبة لك أنت ماذا تأمل في المستقبل نتاع الصحراويين خاصة اللي في المخيمات، وكيفاش هذا السؤال الأول، والسؤال الثاني كيفاش الناشطين حقوقيين محليين وأجانب يقدروا يساعدوا في قضية الصحراء الغربية؟
كما أشار الأخ سعيد أنه المنطقة بعد 13 نوفمبر 2020 شهدت الرجوع للكفاح المسلح وشهدت حرب مدة عام. نحن في حرب، وكما هو معروف أنه المنطقة ككل لا تحتمل المزيد من الصراعات والمزيد من النزاعات. وفي هذا الوضع انه المقبل على التصعيد ومقبل على مزيد من التصعيد في هذا المجال، وبالتالي المنطقه العربيه، منطقه شمال افريقيا غير ما تقبلش المزيد من الصراعات، خاصة لأنه نعرف أنه هذه الصراعات تكون دائما هي البؤرة اللي تظهر فيها الحركات المتطرفة، وهي المنطقة النقطة اللي تتقوى منها هذه الحركات المتطرفة اللي تنتشر في كافة العالم.
يعني أنت أملك هو أنه يفيد
لا
الهدوء؟
أنا هذه مقدمة باش.
Okay. That was an introduction. That he wanted to say that in North Africa, and especially after the war that started at the 13th of November 2020 between Western Sahara and Morocco, it's putting all the North African region in difficult situation, especially that it may lead to escalation between other countries, and on those places where there is no stability, political stability, there will be a lot of extremist people, terrorism, terrorist groups and everything.
ومن هنا دور المنظمات الدولية ودور المجتمع الدولي أنه يكون قوي من أجل إيجاد حل للقضية الصحراوية ومن أجل تطبيق الشرعية الدولية، لأنه نعرف أن القرارات الأممية كلها واضحة، والمتحدة تعترف بحق الشعب الصحراوي في تقرير مصيره، وكافة المنظمات الدولية تعترف بحق الشعب الصحراوي في تقرير مصيره. وبالتالي اليوم المسؤولية هي مسؤولية المنظمات سواء كانت الإقليمية والمحلية والعالمية أنها تضغط من أجل المضي قدما في حل هذا النزاع، لأنه بقاء هذا النزاع بهذا الشكل يشكل خطر ليس فقط على المنطقة وإنما على العالم كله، لأنه التصعيد اليوم هو لا يؤثر فقط على الصحراء الغربية وإنما على جوارها.
Okay, about the role of human rights activists or international organizations, human rights organization, he wants to say that the situation is clear about Western Sahara, and the international law gives the right to Sahrawi people for self-determination, and it still did not happen. So the role of international organization is to push these laws forward to be in a real life, so they can have self-determination. They will not only save the Western Sahara region from a war, but all North African after all the problems that is happening between Morocco and the neighbors countries.
بالنسبة لي رجوع للسؤال الأول، بالنسبة لي المستقبل أراه مظلم نتيجة لتقاعس المنظمات الدولية في إيجاد حل للقضية الصحراوية، وراه مظلم أيضا نتيجة لتطاول بعض الدول الفاعلة في المجتمع الدولي مع المغرب، كما أشار الأخ سعيد فرنسا وإسبانيا. هذا التطاول من شأنه أن يؤزم الوضع، بالتالي أنا المستقبل أراه مظلم بالاعتماد على هذه المعطيات، تقاعس الأمم المتحدة وتورط بعض الدول في تأزيم النساء.
About his own point of view of the future, he said that he's seeing the future dark because of two reasons: that UN mission is not doing what it's supposed to do, and the second thing is that there are some countries that are so important, like France and Spain, and they are preventing Sahrawi people from their right of self-determination, which will leave the case unopened and maybe lead to escalation in the future.
والشعب الصحراوي بطبعه هو شعب محب للسلام، لكن هذه الأمور قد
فرضت علينا الحرب.
فرضت الحرب نتيجة لهذا التخاذل اللي 30 سنة. القضية كانت مدرجة كانت هناك اتفاق بعد 91، لكن هذا التخاذل هو اللي نتج إلى العودة للحرب.
Sahrawi people, they love and prefer peace, but they were waiting 30 years after the ceasefire for getting their right of self-determination. Then they found themselves imposed to the war lately.
Thank you. So We actually do have time for maybe one question, if we have any. I'm not sure. I can't see very well because I have the light in my face.
Yeah, that person there. You were first, right?
Hi, this is a question for Yusuf with regard to Kais Saied, president of Tunisia, who recently dismissed the elected government, it seems, and appointed a new one, which he effectively leads. And I wondered, Yusuf, if you could shed light on whether he enjoys public support, and if he does, what does that mean for the preceding years of supposed democracy in Tunisia, and what does it mean for the future of democracy? Does that make sense?
Repeat the question, please.
Sure, yeah. So if Kais Saied dismissed the elected government and replaced it with a new one with more limited powers that wasn't elected, and he says, and it seems that some believe he enjoys a lot of public support, what does that mean about the preceding years of democracy? And what does it mean about the future of democracy? And I guess specifically to your point, you mentioned that the economy is the vehicle to democracy, but in this case, he seems to be pursuing economic policies that will deliver prosperity, at least he hopes so, without doing it through a democratic process. So how are those actually linked?
I want to speak about to better understand 10 years since 2011 until now has witnessed the rule of law, democratic process, but not economical prosperity. So this leads to the non-democratical act that has been done by the President Kais Saied. Indeed, he enjoys a lot of public support, but this isn't by the book as it is said. It's not a democratical transitions. It's not acts that are done democratically. And since the 25th of July until now, this public support that he enjoys in the summer is not in his favor now, because people are witnessing that there are no concrete economical actions, but instead there is a non-democratic process and a non-concrete economical actions. So this it's kind of a conscious that has awakened within the Tunisian people, and they are waiting for concrete actions that are in harmony with the democratic process. I hope that the information is is clear.
Thank you. We do have time for another one. There is someone holding her hand up.
I'm sorry I didn't get the name of the Moroccan representative and the name of the organization.
Mohammed Sheikh Khoumani. Yes.
Yeah. I would like to ask you, what is your organization doing for the Sahrawi people and your view of the Sahrawi people and the Moroccan occupation?
شكرا. I will speak in Arabic, please, if you will translate
Yes,
for me.
no problem.
Absolutely.
اوكي. اولا انا امثل الجمعيه المغربيه لحقوق الانسان، وهي اكبر منظمه حقوقيه على مستوى القاره الافريقيه، تضم اكثر من 10,000 عضوه و90 فرعا على المستوى الوطني، ولدينا فروع في مختلف المناطق بما ضمنها منطقه الصحراء. والجمعيه تقاريرها الحقوقية هي تقارير التي يتم اعتمادها من طرف كافة المنظمات، سواء منظمة العفو الدولية أو منظمات أخرى، وبالتالي تتحدث عن كافة الانتهاكات. أي انتهاك كان كيفما كان نوعه يتم رصده ويتم إعداد تقرير حوله أو بلاغ حوله، ونحن نشتغل دون انسجاما مع مواقفنا المرتبطة بالنزاع حول الصحراء، باعتبار أن الجمعيات تؤكد على أنه يجب حل هذا النزاع بشكل ديمقراطي، ثم رصد كافة الانتهاكات المرتبطة بهذا النزاع أيا كان مرتكبه. وبالتالي فتقاريرنا ذات مصداقية، وهي نفس التقارير التي تعتمد من طرف الهيئات والمنظمات على المستوى الدولي.
قصدك عندكم تقارير بقضية الانتهاكات حتى أمام في المناطق المحتلة
نعم.
في الصحراء الغربية؟ أوكي.
نعم، لدينا فروع بمنطقة الصحراء. لدينا فرع بمدينة العيون، وهو فرع نشيط جدا يصدر بلاغات وتقارير دورية ترصد كافة الانتهاكات التي ترتكب من طرف السلطات المغربية تجاه المواطنين هناك، وهي نفس التقارير التي يتم تبنيها على مستوى المنظمات.
As a representative of the Moroccan human rights organization, he wants to say that they have a part of the organizations in different places, including Western Sahara, and their government writing any human rights violation against citizens, even in Western Sahara, and a lot of their reports were used in different reports like international organizations. Many international organizations were using their reports when it's related to human rights violation against Sahrawis.
ولهذه الأسباب نحن لأننا لدينا مواقف مخالفة للنظام السياسي بخصوص قضية الصحراء، فنحن نعاقب بمنعنا من الحصول على القاعات العمومية، الفضاءات العمومية للقيام بعملنا والتضييق على أعضائنا وعضواتنا لا في التجمع، لا حقهم في التجمع ولا حقهم في التنظيم، وكذلك حقهم حتى في السفر. فقبل شهر من الآن تم منع رئيسة الجمعية من مغادرة المغرب في اتجاه تركيا لحضور اللقاء الدولي منظم من طرف الأوروميد، الشبكة الأوروبية الأورومتوسطية لحقوق الإنسان.
He wants also to mention that their organization is against the acts that Moroccan government is doing against Sahrawis, and because they are against this human rights violation in Western Sahara, they have been prevented from many things. They got a lot of problems with Moroccan government, including that they did not allow to their representatives or the members to go out of Morocco, like a kind of punishment, including the president of the organization that was not allowed last month to go to Turkey for international human rights meeting, where she was supposed to support the Western Sahara case.
Thank you so much. All right, so we're reaching the end. I'm happy we had time for two really good questions as well here. So we've discussed today how the Arab Spring, how it was experienced, the beginning of it in different countries and areas in the Maghreb region. And we already from the beginning started to touch on the fact that calling it the Arab Spring is sometimes, a definition that people can't fully agree on. And as a journalist, I know that we always look for those catchy phrases and trends that can sum up something bigger, but that is also very varied at the same time. So you always run into these difficulties with definitions in these kind of discussions, but I think we fared well there. So for some, the Arab Spring, it meant ousting dictators and having a beginning of democracy in their countries, but for some it also meant a fight for decolonization. So it's different there. But I think what you all brought up is that it brought people together, both in the countries and in the region. And we have some landmark events, of course, which is protests that maybe made the issues in your countries more evident for the world. In Tunisia, you actually did get a kind of stable democracy, and there was demands for constitutional reform in Morocco. However, when I hear you, I think everyone is quite worried about the future, so it's not a very linear development here. We have political oppression in both Morocco and Tunisia, and we have an ongoing war, actually, that you described risks spreading to the region as a whole. So, unfortunately, we have to end this seminar with a bit of a bit on the dark side. And I'm thinking we can translate maybe afterwards. But I just wanted to say thank you to everyone present. Thanks for being on link with us. Thank you, Emmaus Stockholm, for bringing us all together. As I said before, you're more than welcome to read the article series that Emmaus Stockholm has on their webpage for this particular event. And then I know I was supposed to say that the panelists will be found at their information stand at the exhibition. I'm not so sure that they are going to be allowed to be there. Either way, you can get hold of them now when we finish here if you want to continue asking questions. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a good continued MR-dagarna.
Thank you.